Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we have our usual roundup of the big stories around the world relevant to the Sikh community. And as Canada's National Security and Intelligence Advisor has face-to-face discussions with India's Master of the Dark Arts, Ajit Doval, just what was discussed? Did India receive a warning, or was it merely window dressing with something more sinister afoot? And does the BJP invest nearly $100 million in a new sports complex in Gujarat? Why wasn't this huge sum invested in the real powerhouse of Indian sport, Punjab? Well, maybe the clue is in the name of the new complex, a name that puts to rest any doubts of Hindutva's control over India's government. And why Gujarat? Well, we all know, which is Prime Minister Modi's home state. Anyway, all this and more on today's show. But joining me, as always, is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. Just a quick message for all of our viewers and everybody out there. Breaking news right now is that Sikh has been arrested in Ontario and Canada for firearms-related charges. He has been the subject of notice or different notices from the RCMP and the police stating that his life was at risk. I'm looking at it that he was probably carrying certain weapons to protect himself, because we know the police have been failing to do that adequately when it comes to threats from India. So again, if you are under any of these threats, please don't carry any weapons with you. It's only going to put you at risk. And again, it helps India win with the narrative. So again, just please don't do that. Be careful out there, folks. And other than that, remember, your comments are always important. You can comment about that statement or anything else on the show. We love the comments. Stick around to the end of the show so you can see what comments made the grade today. Back to you, Angus.
Absolutely. And James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And indeed, at the end of today's show, we will, as always, take a look at loads of great comments. So thank you for those. Right, James, lots as always to get through this morning. What are you going to start us off with today?
Absolutely. The story that I just spoke about, it's breaking news, so I will report on that tomorrow night to give you more context and information. But in the meantime, tonight, let's take a look at the diplomatic earthquake that Canada is recognizing Palestine, but it's also drawing a potential roadmap for Khalistan, and we'll talk about that. New alliance forged in steel and shadow. Yes, what the new Saudi-Pakistani defense pact means for India's security and the nuclear balance of power. And the battle being waged in our own backyards, from assassination plots on North American soil to a crisis of faith in Sikhism's highest institutions, and the next generation rising to lead the way forward. As we look at all of these global reports, we will begin them now. Let's get into some details. As we begin tonight with a story that sent shockwaves through the world of international diplomacy, creating a precedent that could redefine the future of sovereignty movements globally, including the Sikh struggle for Khalistan. On September the 21st, in a stunning break from decades of Western foreign policy, Canada, the UK, and Australia have all formally recognized the state of Palestine, and this was even solidified further by public statements by Prime Minister Mark Carney. It still seems weird saying his name as Prime Minister, but regardless, he is making public statements and explaining Canada's principles and the reasons behind that decision. Now, the move, making Canada the first G7 to do so, of course, has drawn a new line in the sand, directly challenging the stance of the United States. In a statement, Prime Minister Mark Carney said the decision was necessary because the Israeli government is working to prevent a Palestinian state from ever being established, citing illegal settlement expansion and a devastating famine in Gaza. Now, for years, the West held that recognition was the reward of the end of a negotiated peace deal. But Canada has flipped this script, and the argument now is that when a dominant state actively works to make a two-state solution impossible, the world can no longer wait. Recognition becomes a defensive tool, a way to protect the very idea of a state when its rights to exist are being erased. Now, this creates what we call a preservation precedent, and its implications stretch far beyond the Middle East. For Sikh sovereignty advocates, this is a potential game changer, ladies and gentlemen. The Khalistan movement's goal may now shift from the immense task of proving it as a state, but to proving that the Sikh right to self-determination is being systematically extinguished by the Indian state. Now, this is where India finds itself in a trap of its own making. New Delhi has labeled the Khalistan movement an extremist threat. To counter it, has engaged in a campaign of what Western intelligence agencies call transnational repression, something we cover quite often and quite in depth. Now, let's take a look back. The assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar on Canadian soil and the foiled plot against Gurpatwant Singh Panun in New York. Now, these have been credibly linked to the Indian state and their agents. Add to this the widespread surveillance that's going on and harassment of the diaspora activists and their families, and a clear picture emerges. Khalistan advocates can now argue that India is using the very tactics of political erasure that prompted Canada to act on Palestine. Yes, it is drawing some pretty unique parallels here. The more aggressively India suppresses the movement now, the stronger the case becomes for applying this new preservation precedent. Very cool. Of course, the parallels are not perfect. The Palestinian cause has a vast diplomatic infrastructure and recognition from over 150 nations. Now, the Khalistan movement is more fragmented, relying on a non-binding referendum to demonstrate the popular will. But let this be known that a door has been opened, a diplomatic language has been written, and for those dreaming of a sovereign Sikh state, the world looks very different today than it did last week. And my apologies, I'll scroll along here. I always get one screen and forget about the other, so we'll try to keep it up here. Now, let's take a look at another major story that is developing in the region, and that, of course, is the Islamic bomb's shadow, as it's referred to in some circles. Now, we turn to another major shift in global power dynamics, and that is on September the 17th, when Saudi Arabia and Pakistan signaled a strategic mutual defense agreement, formalizing a security relationship that has been an open secret for decades. We should note that this is the world's worst kept secret in a way. And with that said, of course, we know that with the decades of movement and partnerships or unofficial agreements, the core of the pact mirrors NATO, and that is that an attack on one is an attack on both. The deal is a direct response to destabilizing the Middle East. Well, that is going to make some changes here in how this pressures other nations in the Middle East. Now, Israeli airstrike in Doha revealed just how vulnerable the Gulf capitals are, and the growing belief that the United States is no longer a reliable protector. And as you can see on the screen there, I've got a beautiful image of the Khalistan flag in the United Nations. I just thought I'd share that with you because I think that it really goes to the core, whether it's Pakistan and Israel or whether it is the similarities between Palestine and the Khalistan movement. I think that it is beautiful that one day we will see the Khalistan flag in the United Nations. However, the real power of the agreement between Pakistan and Israel lies in what it doesn't say. Now, the pact is deliberately ambiguous about whether it extends to Pakistan's nuclear umbrella over Saudi Arabia. When asked, a senior Saudi official said the deal encompasses all military means, and that is a thinly veiled reference to a Pakistan nuclear arsenal. Now, again, where does this draw parallels in why I bring up Khalistan in this same story is very simple. It shows the openness and the willingness of different nations to come together in the region and to try to stabilize security and safety. Now, this could mean that when Khalistan happens, they could potentially be able to join into a defense agreement with Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, among other nations. And this just shows clearly that the global geopolitical and security dynamics are changing around the world. Now, the formidable new Western security bloc of course, is being created, and that's combining Saudi money with Pakistani military might, the foundation of potential Islamic NATO, as some might refer to it. For India, though, this is a strategic nightmare, but also a complex opportunity. On the one hand, it emboldens a chief rival Pakistan with the backing of a global powerhouse. Any future Indian military action against Pakistan now risks triggering a diplomatic and economic firestorm from the Gulf. The deal also is a symbolic blow to Prime Minister Modi's efforts to isolate Pakistan by courting other Gulf nations. Now, when we look at the other hand, this new alliance challenges not just India, but also the United States and Israel. This creates a quiet, unspoken alignment of interests between New Delhi, Washington, and Tel Aviv. All three have now, now have a shared goal containing the influence of the new Saudi-Pakistan axis, and we can expect to see deeper behind-the-scenes cooperation on intelligence and defense, even as India publicly maintains its crucial energy partnerships with Riyadh. Again, it's not expected that any type of changes are on the horizon when it comes to energy security that India has with the Middle East and the purchasing of oil and other energy or other trade deals. But it does definitely put a new mark on the need for peace and the thoughts that India may have had when it came to striking Pakistan again. Now, we also need to look that India's official response has been muted. They've only stated that it will study the implications. But make no mistake, a frantic and urgent strategic reassessment is definitely underway in New Delhi. Now, as we look at this, we also need to move on to the next story, which, of course, the global powers redraw the world map. A series of critical battles are also being fought closer to home. This is within the Sikh global diaspora, and of course we call it the Diaspora Dispatches, something a little different. But first, a threat that has moved from the shadows into the harsh light of day, and that is, as we spoke of earlier, transnational repression. The assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in British Columbia and the foiled plot against Mr. Panun in New York have confirmed what many feared, and that is the India state actively targeting Sikh activists on Western soil, and that is a theme that we talk about quite frequently, and different concerns and stories that have the reality really pushing home. But it goes beyond the assassination plots. The FBI has warned other Sikh activists their lives are in danger, something that we've seen quite frequently in Canada. But now the FBI is taking a more aggressive step in warning people as well. India is weaponizing visas and travel documents, cutting off diaspora members from their families and heritage for being critical of the government. In a cruel, and you could say it's a cruel form of psychological warfare, when families of activists in India are being harassed by the local police there. The goal is simple: to create a chilling effect, to enforce silence and undermine the freedoms of speech and assembly that are the bedrock of life in Canada and the United States. Now, meanwhile, a crisis of a different kind is unfolding within our most revered institutions. And when I say that, we or our, I'm referring to the Sikh diaspora, of course, not myself personally. Now, in early 2025, the SGPC, or the Shiromani Gurdwara Pardonback, I always get that one messed up. The committee, in any event, dismissed the Jathars of 3 of 5 attacks in rapid succession. Now, critics say the move was politically motivated, exposing how the SGPC, an institution governed by 1925 Indian law, is compromised by domestic policies, particularly the influence of the Bidal family. Now, you can see that this institution is being governed under Indian law, but again, India really didn't take shape or become into existence till 1947. So we are talking about more the religious and the cultural background as opposed to the actual country of India. So just for clarification on that point. Now, it's compromised by domestic politics, and particularly the influence of the Badal family. As I said, the turmoil has led to a bizarre conflict where the Turks are declaring each other's leaders guilty of religious misconduct. Again, it's an internal fight that has different opinions from different sides. Now, in response, a powerful movement driven by the diaspora is calling for change, and the idea of a global Sikh parliament is gaining ground. A transnational body free from the Indian state influence that could provide the impartial spiritual leadership that the global faith deserves. So again, very interesting to look at how things are changing. And across the diaspora, a new generation of Sikh leaders is being forged, and this ties right in there. In the United States, there's a group called Sikh Lead, and that program places talented and interested youth in prestigious internships in the U.S. Congress and federal agencies. Their annual Langar on the Hill event is a powerful demonstration of their heart and their soul being a part of American democracy, while never giving up faith and never giving up on their beliefs. Now, globally, the Virtual Sikh Environment Leadership Program, which is what we're talking about here, they connect youth to tackle climate change through the lens of Gurbani, teaching them to create sacred forests based on the wisdom that air is the guru, water is the father, and earth is the great mother. Now, these programs are fusing modern leadership skills with the timeless Sikh principle of seva. Yes, selfless service, as we know. They are cultivating a new generation committed to public service and social justice, ensuring a vibrant and engaged future for the global Panth, no matter what challenges lay ahead. And with that, of course, we need to ensure that the younger generation stays motivated and interested. So again, if you are out there and part of that younger generation, let us know what you think in the comments. We love to hear from you, whether you are one of the elders and offering timeless wisdom, or if you are a part of the new generation and you are looking at how you can honor Sikhism and Sikhi as well as your community. So we'd love to hear the perspective from the younger generation as well. Now, they are, of course, cultivating the new generation committed to public service and social justice, ensuring that vibrant and engaged future for the global Panth, as I said. And from new precedents in international law to new alliances in the global security, they are having their voices heard. But moving on there, we also understand the internal struggles and triumph of the community, and that is the point of the world shifting beneath their feet. The only certainty is that the path forward will require vigilance, unity, and unwavering faith, no matter what your faith is. As we look at that, ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to extend an invitation to our viewers out there. We talk a lot about the social injustices, about transnational repression, about foreign interference. And I would really like to gather more actual personal stories and develop them into a special feature possibly to look at those who have been the subject of threats, those who have been impacted directly by the India government and the Raw Agency or the Hindutva. I would really love to hear your personal stories. And of course, they may be lengthy, so it may not be appropriate to share them in the comment section. But by all means, please feel free to email me. My email is james.cousineau@satledgetv.com. So send out your messages and tell me all about your story. I won't release your name or your location, but I am very interested in looking into this as to really getting a feel, because we talk about the news reports all the time, but we are not getting any direct feedback from our viewers, Angus. And I would really like to hear how they've personally been impacted by this problem.
Yes, James, absolutely. I think that's a fair enough invite. Please, obviously, if you are in our audience and you have a story to share, we absolutely love to do. We do love to hear from you. Many of you have actually emailed us to the message at satlogetv.com with all sorts of interesting links and things. But do tell us your personal stories. But if you do, and we'll, of course, quite have to keep you anonymous as well. So, but it's important that we share stories like this because others can learn from those stories. James, I want to just quickly cover a couple of those stories that you covered there. I think they're fascinating dynamics in play at the moment, globally speaking. The Palestine issue, I mean, it's so divisive. It's a huge issue. And I'm always a little bit reluctant to use Palestine as a model to build khalistan. Because the trouble is, of course, Palestine is inherently linked with terrorism, Hamas, etc. Is that Hamas are trying to bomb their way to a new nation? That's really not what Khalistan is about. Khalistan is a peaceful and democratic movement, and they're doing it properly through the United Nations, and that is how Khalistan will be established. Palestine itself, well, I mean, again, I don't want to go down that discussion because it's a huge discussion. It's very divisive, actually. I do notice that people are very divided over this issue, whether they believe it is a valid claim for a land or not. But I'm interested also in our audience's opinion. Do let us know your thoughts on the Palestine issue. Are you pro or against the whole concept? Are you pro what Israel's up to after those dreadful October the 7th attacks, etc., etc.? But anyway, I don't want to go down that road because it's not really too relevant to us. What I would like to talk about, though, are the fascinating dynamics, the global dynamics just falling into place very slowly but surely. There's an awful lot, and I've talked about this recently, there's an awful lot going on behind the scenes, globally speaking. I think there is a bit of a seismic shift going on. We always talk about this bogeyman, the great potential future enemy, that of China. So, of course, everything that's going on a global scale are all the little pieces, these tectonic plates falling into place, politically speaking, of alignments and alliances and really polarizing the world into one side against another. That one side, of course, contains China, potentially Russia. Does it contain India? That's the big question. And on the other side, we have the Western democracies, the United States, Europe, down under, as I often refer to the guys downstairs in the Southern Hemisphere. But what I do find particularly fascinating, Pakistan. Pakistan has always been an interesting piece of this jigsaw because, of course, it is a traditional, historic enemy of India. They have, of course, come to physical blows on many occasions since 1947. And, of course, since Pakistan became independent. And it's interesting, this alliance with Saudi Arabia. Now, this is not too surprising because, of course, Pakistan has always had a very close relationship over many years, well, since its inception, with the United States, particularly in the West, and, of course, with the United Kingdom. But of course, it has forged alliances with the Islamic world. Pakistan is primarily an Islamic nation. And this is, again, one of the root causes of a lot of this conflict between India and Pakistan, this ideological difference between the Islamic faith and the primarily Hindu faith of the majority of India. And of course, the J&K issues, India always blames on Islamic extremism, etc. So the Islamic element is a key part of this whole issue. But the Islamic element isn't simple, as we all know. The Islamic element, of course, is itself divided between Sunnis and Shias. And I'm no huge expert on this, but what I do know, Pakistan is primarily Sunni. Now, Iran, here's another piece of this jigsaw. Iran is primarily Shia. This is the other splinter, the fragmentation of Islam. And of course, Iran is, I would say, a little bit more in bed with India. So India is a bit more aligned with Iran. Don't forget, Narendra Modi went to visit his friend Xi Jinping in China recently, alongside Vladimir Putin, Belarus, North Korea. Also there was Iran, Shia Iran. Now, Shia Muslims have this very fractious, let's call it, relationship with their fellow Muslims, the Sunni Muslims. Who is Sunni? Saudi Arabia. So you see, Sunni Pakistan has aligned with Sunni Saudi Arabia. Now, who are friends with Sunni Saudi Arabia? The West. Who do you think has armed most of the Sunni Middle East? It's the West. The United States, the United Kingdom, Europe. We are great allies, is that the right word? Maybe that's too strong, but certainly we have forged alliances. And we actually do have deep historic links with Saudi Arabia. Certainly here in the United Kingdom, our royal family, for example, are best buddies with the royal family of Saudi Arabia. So you can start to see these alliances now. So Pakistan now, through this chain of dynamics, Pakistan is now forming alliances with Sunni Saudi Arabia and the other Sunni Middle East states, which in turn have alliances with the West. So you can see Democratic West now has secured Pakistan in some sort of, well, as we've seen now, potential nuclear pact. India, on the other hand, it seems to be siding increasingly, well, it's always been siding with Russia, but it seems to be increasingly siding with Shia Iran, etc. Iran trying to get hold of a nuclear weapon. Of course, India is itself a nuclear state anyway. But again, you can start to see these dividing lines, James. And this is what I find fascinating now, is how the world is starting to fall into one of two camps. There used to be a lot of countries that were, I would say, in the East versus West battle that were fairly neutral. But now you can see even nations like Pakistan and, of course, the Middle East being drawn into sides, into taking sides. We see the Shias, who the West have traditionally called as the sponsors of terrorism around the world. We certainly know Iran is behind a lot of the global terrorism. How ironic, then, that India, that is now increasingly being accused of becoming a bit of a terrorist state itself after its transnational oppression, its extra national murders of people like Hardeep Singh Nijjar, etc. So you can start to see, I mean, again, it's very easy through the lens of Western, well, let's call it propaganda, whatever you want to call it, but we're now starting to increasingly see India. We are asked this question, is India a friend or a foe? Well, we have to say, certainly from the facts that we're seeing, James, India is increasingly becoming a foe because it is aligning itself increasingly. This wall is going up between the East and the West. Which side is India falling on? It doesn't seem to be Democratic West. It seems to be falling increasingly so onto this terrorist-backed Shia Iran side, Belarus, North Korea, Russia, China, the authoritarian regimes. This is very sad, and I think it's tragic for the people of India. Are the people of India, who actually have bigger things to worry about in their own lives, are they really aware of where their leaders are taking them? They are taking them away from becoming the world's largest democracy into something a little bit more sinister, James, and that should worry us.
Absolutely, it should, Angus. And, as we look at all of these different geopolitical issues, it is really unfolding at levels that we've never seen before in terms of the new conflicts and the battlegrounds that are out there.
Indeed. So, let's move on to my first story, which is sort of linked to some degree. And this is I'm going to talk about Canada, James's home territory. But it does. Oh, sorry, I've got the wrong button there. There we go. So Canada Canada's taken a fantastic stance in this situation over the last couple of years, particularly with Trudeau when he was Prime Minister. And again, we've talked at great length about how Trudeau has stood up very nobly, I have to say. I'm no fan of Trudeau myself, but I've always given him credit for standing up to India's transnational oppression. He called it out for what it was. And again, he actually won a lot of hearts, let's say, in the Sikh community for his stand against it. And so he's not perfect, but he did a great job in that respect. But what has happened since? Mark Carney, who, of course, has since superseded him. Well, we've had questions about Mark Carney, and regular viewers of our show know full well my opinions on Mark Carney. I think he's a globalist puppet of the World Economic Forum, but that's a personal perspective. But ultimately, we have to judge by results. Now, what has happened recently? Over the weekend, Canada's National Security and Intelligence Advisor, a lady called Natalie Drouin, if I pronounce her correctly, met her counterpart in India, Ajit Doval. Now, Ajit Doval, again, a name that will be very familiar to those who follow the whole story of transnational oppression and India's misbehaviour, to put it euphemistically. Well, they met over the weekend. And a statement was released over the weekend by the ministry in Canada. And the statement read, "I met with Ajit Doval. We discussed our respective security concerns and committed to non-interference, including refraining from transnational oppression. We also agreed on the importance of reciprocal exchange of information and mutual responsiveness." And it followed, of course, this, as the statement continues, it followed, of course, when Carney met Modi at the G7 in Kananaskis, that, again, James reported on at great length when that happened. And with these talks and the recent exchange of high commissioners between Canada and India to renew the diplomatic relationships, we're advancing a relationship based on mutual respect, the rule of law, and a commitment to the principle of sovereignty and territorial integrity. Now, what do we make of this? And of course, everybody has been pouring through this statement line by line, word for word, as indeed the issuers of this statement knew that the world's press and analysts would be doing so. And it's very hard, really, to read between the lines. It's, on the face of it, pretty unambiguous. What does it really mean? What did Ms. Druin talk with Ajit Doval about? Well, of course, there's been 101 different interpretations of this. And if you look at Sikhs for Justice, for example, our old friend Mr. Panoon has been, of course, he's jumped on this and said, well, it's very clear that this lady has given Ajit Doval absolutely a slap between the chops, as we say in English, and said, look, this behaviour stops now. We follow the rule of law. And actually, indeed, you can indeed interpret that statement where it says mutual respect, the rule of law, and a commitment to the principle of sovereignty. Those are key words there, because, of course, they have a subtext there. You breached our sovereignty by murdering Hardeep Singh Nijjar. You broke international law. We all know that. And so the question is, well, it's here in the statement, but was this really impressed? Was it pushed home? But Gurprashant Singh Panoon seems to think so. He's made it very clear in his statements. He's interpreted this as Canada has now given India a very, very clear warning, an unambiguous warning. You stick to the rule of law, you respect our sovereignty. Yes, we've renewed diplomatic relations, but as I say, his interpretation is that Canada is standing up now for the rule of law and standing up to India at last. Well,
Right.
Just as a slight sideline on this, and it's interesting, Sikhs for Justice did also call out this guy, Daniel Boardman, James. I don't know if you've come across this guy before. He calls it, well, he is a senior correspondent for the National Telegraph, a news outlet, but he also describes himself as a Sikh activist, which I find quite fascinating. But he tweeted after this same statement, as did pretty much everybody with an interest in this story. They all had their own opinion and interpretation. But this guy, Daniel Boardman, he said, look, 2 years ago, Justin Trudeau got up in Parliament and claimed to have credible allegations that India was behind the death of suicide, suicide bombing enthusiastic Hardeep Singh Nijjar. As of today, the evidence is still nowhere to be found, and we've ruined a relationship with, his full tweet is, here we go, and we've ruined our relationship with a country of 1.4 billion, but we did gain brownie points with a narco-terrorist ring called Khalistan. So this guy is basically a Hindutva mouthpiece. He's yet another person, probably on the payroll of Hindutva, to spout anti-Khalistan propaganda. And of course, he's sort of waded in here as well. And Sikhs for Justice have responded, and they even named him. Canadian Daniel Hindutva Boardman has been amplified by Indian state-aligned media during PBD week and beyond. Is Boardman on board with Modi's government to peddle India's narrative and undermine Canada's investigation into the assassination of Hardeep? Or is Boardman just a nincompoop? Well, I'll let that spat follow its own route. But ultimately, but Baz News, of course, and Baz does represent certainly the views of a large part of the Sikh diaspora. And they actually have looked at the same statement. They've come up with a little bit more, I would call it circumspect interpretation of it. They say, okay, hopefully this does mean that post this meeting, India has indeed been warned, look, you stick to the rule of law. But what they have said in the same breath is they've reminded our audience, and indeed linked to one of the stories they wrote in June after Narendra Modi's visit to Canada, where he was met, I have to say, most warmly by Mark Carney. And that article read as follows: after the anniversary of the 1984 Indian Army invasion of the Sri Darbar Sahib complex, of course Operation Blue Star, the Canadian government has invited Prime Minister Modi to the upcoming summit. For Sikhs across Canada, this isn't just a tone-deaf decision, it's a horrendous betrayal. The same Modi government that stands accused of orchestrating the assassination of Canadian citizens on Canadian soil, including the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, is now being welcomed by Prime Minister Carney. So again, they're just saying, look, let's just not get too carried away here with this statement. Very nice, of course, that Ms. Druin has said you've got to respect our sovereignty and the rule of law, etc. But on the other hand, they are welcoming Narendra Modi. Carney is still shaking his hand. They're still trying to tie up trade deals. But where's the discussion about human rights? It all seems to be slightly brushed under the carpet now, James. And I think this is the worry, really, is that, yes, of course, we all need to get along. We all need to tie up international commerce. But the loser at the moment still seems to be human rights. Narendra Modi is getting away with it. That is the fear, that Modi is still getting away with it.
Absolutely, Angus. And let's not forget that the Hardeep Singh Nijjar case, as well as others that have not been publicly named in terms of the actual defendants, are very much working their way through the legal system. As such, here in Canada, unlike other parts of the world, and I don't say that as a slight in any way, I'm just saying that the way that it works, Canada is very reluctant to release investigative information during the court process. They also are very reluctant to release policing reports or other law enforcement investigations until the cases have been finalized through the court system. It's all about maintaining the integrity of the Canadian judicial system and the way that we work. This should not in any way make people believe that there is no evidence. The speaking out in the Canadian Parliament and calling another nation out for transnational repression is not something that is done with jest. It's not something that is done without extreme and deep thought and analysis. It is a strategic position to call them out for their human rights abuses, especially as they impact Canadians on Canadian soil. I am very confident that as this case and others that are currently being linked to India, let's not forget there are others in terms of murders, violence, attacks, and much more that are still making their way through the Canadian judicial system. So don't believe for a moment that because that evidence has not been brought forward in a very public view that it doesn't exist. Because I guarantee you, if they are calling it out, it exists. And let's also keep in mind that they are still working with an increased level of cooperation from the India government and law enforcement there. So again, they want to try to calm down the rhetoric in terms of the public speech and information coming from Canadian politicians, while India is actually starting to cooperate a bit more. To what extent, we don't know, but again, I thought that was just a very important point to bring up here in that narrative, Angus.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that is a very important point, because this guy, Daniel Boardman, this, quote, nincompoop Daniel Boardman, describes himself as a senior correspondent for this news outlet, and yet he says, as of today, the evidence is still nowhere to be found. If he was a proper journalist, this proves the point that he has an agenda here, and he clearly is rolling out a Hindutva agenda. As a proper journalist wouldn't say that. A proper journalist would know exactly what you just said, James, is that there is an ongoing investigation. The evidence is probably there, but it's not in the public domain. And he will know that because they can't release it in the public domain because it would jeopardise an ongoing investigation. And yet out he comes with this. So clearly this guy has an agenda. And again, he's just another Hindutva mouthpiece. If you ever need any doubt that Hindutva has so many people on its payroll spouting anti-Sikh, anti-khalistan, pro-Modi propaganda, pro-Hindutva propaganda, well, it's writ large on this one. So now talking about Hindutva propaganda, James, I want to talk about my second story. This actually, I have to say, it's almost a good news, bad news story. The good news is it's a new it's a huge sports stadium being built in India. And I've always said I'm a huge lover of India. I love Indian sport. I'm a great cricket fan, and we have this wonderful tie with India about cricket, particularly from here in the UK. And I always get a warm feeling every time India, England play. It's always a great battle on the cricket pitch, and it's a great tie-up between our two nations, our two cultures and countries, etc. And so when I see this story, to me, it's a good news story in many ways. It's this incredible new sports stadium that's been announced in India, in Ahmedabad. But of course, the story isn't quite so warm and fuzzy. There's a dark undercurrent to it. So let's go through this story. And I've taken this, again, this news outlet is just one at random that's reported on it, but just to give you the facts. Ahmedabad gets this new stadium. Union Home Minister, and again, there's another clue here, Amit Shah inaugurated this new stadium, the Veer Savarkar Sports Complex in Narangpura in Ahmedabad. This is in Gujarat state. dedicating this 825 crore, that's nearly $100 million. It's a huge investment. Bearing in mind this is a nation that has so much poverty, so this is a massive investment, $100 million nearly. This new $100 million facility to the nation, it says, yet it's built in Gujarat. Calling sports the soul of India, indeed it is, I agree with that. Shah said the new complex would inspire athletes to aim for global excellence, and he added under Modi's leadership, Indian sports has seen major reforms. Now, Chief Minister Bhupendra Patel called the inauguration a landmark moment for Gujarat's sporting growth. Union Sports Minister Mansukh Mandavia added that such infrastructure was crucial for realising the vision of a Viksit Bharat through sports. Now, Viksit Bharat, for those who might not know, and I didn't, I had to look this up, it means developed India. So again, it's looking about uniting India. And again, this is where we start to sort of see the subcurrent, the subtext of what this is all about. Viksit Bharat 2047 is the government's vision to drive the mission of making India a completely developed nation by its 100th anniversary since, of course, 1947. And I just thought there was a misprint there saying independence in 2047. It's, of course, in 1947. Anyway, over the past 2 decades, Gujarat's sports budget has risen to 486 crore. So that's only half of the value of this one single stadium. So you can start to see proportionally how huge this investment is and how significant it is. So even that the overall budget has only been like 50 million for Gujarat, and suddenly they've had this 100 million stadium built, enabling the creation of 23 sports complexes across 21 districts. In Ahmedabad, work is also underway on the 233-acre Sardar Patel Sports Enclave near the Narendra Modi Stadium. There's nothing like a bit of ego going in play here, along with a para-athlete high-performance centre for differently abled athletes, etc., etc. So they're calling it a world-class infrastructure. And here are a few pictures. I mean, it is a fabulous complex, and it is great to see, I'd say, and for the local people who are into sports, a huge facility, wonderful facility, etc., etc. Okay, so the positive side, as I say, I like sports, I love India, and it's great to see this huge investment that is going to encourage, particularly the young in India, to get out there, get active, and get involved in sports. But unfortunately, there is this dark subtext here. This is a $100 million investment in Gujarat state. Why Gujarat? Now, I said in the introduction, why Gujarat? Because Punjab and Haryana are really the key sporting powerhouses of India. Of course, the Sikh community particularly, sports, again, is so inherently embedded as part of Sikhi, as part of its religion, as part of its cultural background, because, of course, the martial arts, the more militant side in history, was a huge part of being a Sikh. That's why they made such great soldiers and have such a great heroic military history. Well, of course, that has evolved over civilization into sporting prowess. So, of course, the Punjab and northwest India is really the centre for sporting excellence in India, the Punjab, etc., and Haryana. So why then Gujarat, which is absolutely not known for its sporting prowess, why has Gujarat suddenly been gifted this enormous investment, this huge stadium, far in disproportion to its ability, its sporting presence, let's say, in India? Right. Well, again, the clue is Narendra Modi is from Gujarat, and I believe Amit Shah also is from Gujarat. And we often talk about this Gujarat mafia. That's my term. I call it the Gujarati mafia. Yeah, there's clearly a bit of favouritism going on. And another sinister element to this, and if you ever had any doubt who actually is pulling the strings of the Indian government, the name of this complex, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar Stadium Complex. This guy had no sporting links, no sporting background. He was nothing to do with sport. This guy was an Indian politician and an ideologue. Savarkar developed the Hindu nationalist political ideology of Hindutva while confined in jail at Ratnagiri in 1922. And the prefix Veer, he calls himself Veer, has been given him by himself when he penned his own biography. So again, this complex apart from being located in Gujarat, Narendra Modi's home state, is named after one of the founders of Hindutva. So, James, you start to see this dark subtext. This isn't about the encouraging sport of India. It's imposing a stamp, an egotistical stamp of the BJP government, of Narendra Modi's government, but more importantly, it's stamping Hindu extremist nationalism on Gujarat, on India itself, saying, yes, we're all one nation, we are all one Bharat, we are all one India, but really we're all one Hindutva, ideologically driven extremist nation, is what this is really about, James.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's about feeding egos. It's about feeding the bureaucracy as well as the corruption in many areas. But as a Canadian, I'm disappointed. I think that I might be out in the farms there when it comes to trying to find myself a patch of ice. I don't see an ice rink there. I can't lace up my skates, grab a stick, and hit there for some real hockey. But hey, maybe in the future in khalistan, I'll be able to go and see some ice hockey there.
I don't think you'll see
but
much.
Anyway, that beautiful facility, I don't know about location and naming. I think that money definitely could have been used in a much greater capacity with more impact if they looked at what was going on in Punjab and the slow and long recovery that it's going to be when it comes to the monsoons and the flooding and the opening of the reservoirs and dams to basically use the water as a weapon. I think that money could have been earmarked there and had a much greater impact on the nation.
Indeed, and I think these large-scale infrastructure investments always come with a subtext in India. It's very clear. There's always a political element to all these sorts of schemes. They're not for the general benefit of the population. They always carry with them a political message, and this is a prime example of that. A huge investment in terms of India, and again, in the context of the poverty that goes on in India, where every dollar spent is crucial to try and lift India as a future superpower out of poverty. And we see it, carrying a huge political message in a state that likewise has a huge political bearing as well. So it's, as I say, it's a good news, bad news story. And I have no doubt the people of Punjab will be looking at this in absolute seething anger as their state continues to be neglected, deeply neglected by Delhi. And here's another slap in the face to Punjab and Haryana and certainly the Sikh community. So anyway, let us know your views on that one. Talking of which, James, let's move on to your views, the audience's views. And many comments have come in. Thank you, as always, to our audience for your huge contributions, always very much appreciated. Govinda Saund starts us off today. Yes, we talked a lot about this huge... this terrible ongoing situation of the anti-immigration debates, the anti-immigration marches, this division between left and right, this division between our communities right across the Western world. Literally, it's not just the UK, it is the entire Western world at the moment, being riven by these fractures with this weird agenda to pour immigrants into our countries, which of course is causing so much division and hatred and problems between left and right. But Govinda Saund actually just brings us a little bit down to earth and says, look, particularly here in the UK, immigration problem is a deep-rooted and complex. How true this comment is. It isn't black and white. There are so many nuances, so many aspects to this. Lol Peopleism, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, says, thank you guys for showing minorities living in majorities very hard. And this again, put a different angle on this. Don't forget, for our communities out there who are a minority, how extraordinarily hard. It's not simple. As I said, James, this is not a black and white argument. It never has been. There are too many nuances. And it requires such a grown-up debate, as I often say, because these guys, these people, these communities who live amongst us, trying to build their own lives, are up against so many challenges. The Sikh community have proven how powerful they are and how successful they are at this, but there are other communities out there who do really struggle with this. And I'll say thank you to our commenters on this, because of course you many of you have experienced it firsthand, James.
Absolutely. And, when we look at this, it is, you look at the minorities, majorities, the unity and the separation. And I think that it is very difficult for different people, especially for us, Angus, as Caucasians, to try and push the reality and the truth that is the challenge of minorities. Because let's face it, we are not there. We haven't had that lived experience to the level that the Sikhs have, that the Indians have, that the Chinese or Japanese, and that when it comes to minority views and minority approach. So again, thanks for recognizing that we are doing our best to represent and to educate, but at the same time also keep in mind that we do so with a very sensitive thought that goes behind the stories we report. And it's important that you interact with us as you've done here to keep us in line, but also to share your lived experiences with us so that we can make sure that we're on point.
Indeed, I do find it interesting that even amongst the Sikh community discussion groups, the divisions as well, even over this immigration issue. Again, it's such a divisive issue that people really do fall into so many different opinions on this one subject. So Govinda Sawn's comment, absolutely right. It's so deep-rooted and complex that it's very hard. As I say, there is no black and white in that whole issue. Stay safe. This is an interesting comment. Again, we don't have an awful lot of time to get into it in detail, but this is all about symbolism. This is a great comment that's come from Stay Safe. It talks about, and actually Surinder Singh talked about this as well in his show on the channel. If you're a Punjabi speaker, do have a look at Talking Punjab. That's always a great show for the Punjabi speakers. You talk about British gave fitting name to India after the male god Indra, who was ruled by the female warrior Britannia, thus India, as you say. Now, Bharat Mata. We talk about this concept of Bharat Mata. Well, Indra holds a trident and has a lion. Now, many who've seen the figurehead of Britannia, this symbol of Britannia, Great Britain. Likewise, Britannia holds a trident and has a lion standing behind her. So this is all about symbolism. So the whole comment is saying, do people realise how all these symbols that we all fight for, that we all represent, that we all stand up patriotically and support, even in India, do you realise what these symbols actually represent? And as Stay Safe says, most Indians probably don't even realise that the symbols that they happily march behind and patriotically literally fight for, you don't realise that there is a link between those symbols representing India and those symbols representing Britannia. And as the implication here is that Britain still rules and controls India. Well, I don't know if that is true. All I would say is that there are very deep ties between the Indian establishment and the British establishment, whoever those people are and whatever that establishment is. But ultimately, there are those behind the scenes who control these levers of power. They control you and I. They control all of our lives. For whatever games that they enjoy doing this, and we just have to live our lives as best we can. But ultimately, it does explain an awful lot that goes on behind the scenes. These deep embedded connections between India and the UK, and I don't think it is even India UK. I think there is just one establishment, one ruling elite, global ruling elite, whatever. I don't know. You choose your conspiracy of choice, but clearly there are those who are powerful enough to control global events and control our lives from a very high level. James.
Absolutely. And I just want to give a special shout out to Stay Safe, because there's a lot of time and effort that goes into a lot of the comments that Stay Safe shares. And it's not just here, it's also on our Substack. And just the time and the dedication as a viewer, I just wanted to make sure that Stay Safe and others know that we deeply, deeply appreciate you taking such time and being so invested in our program with us. So
Indeed.
Thank you for that. And I think the comment itself is very informative and raising that awareness as well.
Yeah, these symbols are all around us. And likewise, you talk about the SGBC logo, looking like the BJP party logo. Yeah, maybe that's no accident. And I think a lot of people don't realise how powerful these symbols are, and actually what is behind a lot of these symbols. And here in the West, there's a huge amount of Masonic symbolism that people don't even realise. I mean, if you ever see a black and white checkered floor, it's meaningless to you or I as we walk over it. But that in itself is a Masonic symbol. They are all around us, everywhere you look. And there's loads of books. It's a fascinating subject if you look into it. But those symbols are all around us. We don't realise, and they're very powerful, these symbols. And they infiltrate our lives in a very subliminal way. way. Likewise, it's happening in India. And of course, there's a huge Masonic link to India as well from the old days. But anyway, that's another rabbit hole. Let's not go down. Okay, TC, thank you. Another one of our regulars, and another one that we'll pay tribute to for the huge contributions on a regular basis, TC. This was after my discussion with Dr. Sandhu. And Dr. Sandhu sent out a very clear warning to our community. Look, you've got to stand up against what's going on. We've got to stand up, not just for our rights, but we've got to push this Khalistan agenda, because this is the only solution. And TC absolutely really falls totally behind, in alignment with this argument, saying, look, we are under a multilateral attack, and it does fit the criteria for genocide. Well, we've had several genocides over the last few decades against the Sikh community. The only solution is Khalistan. That is the only way to liberate the people of Punjab, I think, is absolutely right there, and is a conclusion that we reach almost on a daily basis, James.
Absolutely, and one that we will continue to raise every day.
Indeed we will. Blue Robe, this is interesting actually, well picked up on this one, Blue Robe. Said, everyone here in Punjab is affected by dementia, in other words, the collective amnesia. People seem to have forgotten that central ministers only recently, before the floods, we will kill Pakistan with drought, and after that we will drown them with floods. Just a couple of months ago, when there was that spat post that Pahalgam terrorist attack. Punjab is not collateral, right. It was targeted to with Pakistan. So, yeah, Blue Road points out, everybody seems to have forgotten that ministers actually made these statements publicly that we will weaponise water against Pakistan. And likewise, of course, it's happened against the Sikhs in the Punjab, James.
And we've seen how that happens, Angus. And it is, I don't think it was just coincidental myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the evidence is out there that clearly there was a bit of an agenda at play behind these floods this year. Right, Critics Corner comes back, I'm delighted to say. It's been a while, and I have to pay tribute to Rupinder Danjal for forming our Critics Corner primarily today. Rupinder Danjal has made several comments, actually, and it's worth talking about some of these, because they're not all actually wrong, I have to say. Concentrate on the homeless, druggies, knife gangs in your country. Nothing's happening to Sikhs in Punjab. Those in Western countries should be given their Khalistan out of Western countries who think Sikhs are suffering in India. Well, again, this revisits an old argument. Khalistan should be built in Canada or the United States. Well, no, you're obviously missing the whole point about democratic secessionism and the right to self-determination. Khalistan should be in Khalistan. There's no argument about that. And your other point is nothing's happening to Sikhs in Punjab. Well, actually, I think there's many who disagree with that. Blue Robe comes back in to say, look, and there's lots of responses to all these. And Blue Robe was one of them again. As a Sikh guy living in Punjab, an educated farmer, I'm fully aware of our history and all the partiality from Indian colonisers. There are many people like him fighting for our rights, but know the consequences too. We're going in the right direction. It will take time, but we are getting there, etc., etc. But Rupinder Danjal comes back with an interesting comment, and I have to say this is a valid point. Saying, look, let's say Khalistan is established. I'm just going to paraphrase what he says. I say it's a he, it might be she, I don't know, but it is Rupinder. So basically what Rupinder's saying is that if you get your Khalistan, and all these farmers, let's say, merge on Khalistan, how are they going to live? What land? Are you just going to gift them land? How are they going to come to your country and build a life? And I think this actually is a valid point. And you likewise say, is that your country's going to be landlocked. So how are you going to survive as a country, etc.? Well, we've covered that separately. It doesn't necessarily have to be landlocked. But also, and you say, will all those Sikhs who are non-Jats be treated equally in your land, considering you mistreat people of Bihar today, as well as poor Sikhs in Punjab? Well, again, this revisits another argument that we've had in the past about that there is a certain hierarchy, clearly, and James and I, we're non-Sikhs, so we can only see it from the outside. But there even is a hierarchy within the Sikh community as well, that the Jats, let's say, have been accused have been mistreating other Sikhs, of poorer Sikhs. So I think that the genuine points here, which I think are points that need to be addressed, is, when Khalistan is established, how are people the incomers, how are they going to be allowed to build lives? Will they be given land? Well, probably not. They'll just have to do what anybody who comes to a new land. They just have to build their own lives themselves. But ultimately, these are questions that have to be answered, James. When Khalistan is established, there are lots of social issues that will have to be addressed. I've no doubt they are already being thought about, but certainly these are valid questions to ask.
Certainly they are, Angus. And I think that what people are not looking at as well is the fact that people will be empowered and encouraged to build themselves a life and a legacy, whether that's through land purchases, as they build themselves up, just as they have in many other in other nations. But I also think that it is important to realize that the repression of people will be something that you won't see in Khalistan as you do in India, as you do in Pakistan, as you do even in Canada to some extent. Let's not fool ourselves, folks. But yeah, I think that that's something to keep in mind as well.
Indeed, and don't forget that the societal platform of Khalistan will be it's rejecting the whole caste system. Of course, there'll be a social hierarchy. There always is in any country, in any society. But ultimately, it's ridding itself of this caste system. That is the problem, and I guess your mindset is still based around the whole caste system. There will be no caste. Everybody is effectively treated as equal in Khalistan. And then, sorry if I jumped. I think I might have just skipped ahead of a set of comments. No, we're okay. Oh, here we are, the final set. Yes, Cirque starts us off again on this one, saying, "Thanks a lot, Sir Angus, Dr. Sandy. We will not stop until we achieve our goal of Khalistan." But Rupinder comes back, and this is the comment actually I really did want to raise. Particular relating to some of his earlier comments, and this is again why this appears on Critics Corner, is Rupinder says, "What nonsense, Sikhs are free in India." Now this is an important point because this is your perception. They are really clearly not free in India. Clearly, as Cirque responds saying, "Well, bro, I know you're not a Sikh, because if you were, clearly you would know that what you just said is absolute nonsense. Sikhs are not free in India." We, again, James, we talk about daily is that Sikhs are not free in India. They are persecuted, they are oppressed. You only need to watch our show on a daily basis to understand what actually is happening. If Sikhs were free, we wouldn't need to have a show called Perspectives. We wouldn't need to be here every day battling on the stories that we battle about, James.
Oh, no, there's no stories floating in midair, Angus. We're not pulling it out of midair. The facts that we bring are just that. We don't pull things out of midair. We take it from reality, reports, and people who are giving us the details that we do research on as well. So keep that in mind. Again, folks, that this is the reality that we face. And yes, there are not only Sikhs, but others who are not free in India as well. So.
Indeed, and my favourite name of all for the day is "That's My Cheeseburger." Comes with a great comment, actually. Punjab is under siege. People can't talk about the rights of Sikhs in India. Their social media accounts are being banned, even if they live in another country. Well, there's the perfect response to Rupinder Danjal. If you think the Sikhs are free in India, there's your response from "That's My Cheeseburger." He's got it absolutely bang on there, James. I think there's no doubt. That says it all. And the final comment really goes to Bachan Kaur Bachan. We always like to finish on a Khalistan Zindabad. I love you, Khalistan Punjab. Indeed, James, that is what we're here for.
Exactly, Angus. Just more great comments, and we love to finish on those high notes.
Indeed, we do. But there we must bring Perspectives to a close for another day. Please don't forget to keep those comments coming in. Thank you to all of you who have contributed, as many of you have done. There's been some great, fascinating comments to come in. So thank you for those. Don't forget you can message directly as well, as indeed many of you have been doing, to message@satlugetv.com. If there's anything you want to talk to us specifically about. And of course, we can keep you anonymous should you so require. But that is it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.